Okay, we're going to roll right into Ken Hamilton. He's our final speaker for today. Ken, are you there and able to unmute? Ken is joining us. His company's called Biomineral Technologies. If you've listened to him, he's been a podcast speaker before. He did an awesome presentation a few months ago at one of these summits. We're going to do a little bit different flavor of presentation here today. He's a wealth of knowledge. Go back and listen, especially if you're a cattle producer. Listen to his presentation that he did last. You can find that on our podcast channel. But Ken understands soil health and at a very practical level. He understands it deeply, but he also connects soil health to plant health, to animal health, to human health, to the health of our environment. And I would even go so far as to say, all of that feeds to the economic viability of a nation, right? It's been said that a nation that destroys its soil destroys itself. And we don't do that overnight. We do it by degrees. And we've certainly done that. And we're propping up our nation right now, I would say, because we have destroyed the soil at many levels. And so at some point, we are going to pay the price for that. The good thing is that we have people like these speakers on this summit today and in the regenerative agriculture movement who understand that we can turn the tide. Like, I believe it's not too late. I don't think we're going to self-destruct. But in order to do that, we've got to do some things different. So Ken, we're looking forward to hearing what you have to present today.
Well, thank you, Jared. This is going to be a little bit of a bumpy ride because we're going to hop from PowerPoint to PowerPoint to cover specific topics because part of this is in process and part of it is already proven. And so we're going to present this concept as a two-part program. All right. And so part one is we're going to talk about things we've already accomplished in the remediation of food toxins. And part two, we're right in the middle of remediating environmental toxins. Okay, both of these are critical because there's 1,000 voices out there, all of which are more qualified to speak about the evils of glyphosate, pesticides, the broad spectrum of chemical toxicity that our soils have been exposed to for decades. And so our point is not to add one more voice to that choir, because when you look at the beginning of chemistry into the agricultural system almost 100 years ago, and you see how far we've advanced, then you look at the persistent toxicity and the longevity of these chemicals in our soil. Simply banning them at this point is a ideal situation, but it is not the solution because we are not going to outlive the existence and presence of toxins in our soils and in our food supply. We're coming apart at the seams because we already have an overload of this chemical toxicity and environmental toxicity and food toxicity in our soils, in our plants, in our food. And our health status in the US is rock bottom. We are the worst of every developed nation. There are a lot of third world countries that put us to shame on the health side. We have the highest per capita spending on health. And so something in our system is very, very awry. So we're going to talk about two things. We're going to talk about the results that we have, and we're going to talk about how we remediate both environmental toxins out of the food chain now. Because when you look at glyphosate, it has the potential to to remain in a soil on a sandy soil from 40 to 50 years. In in a normal heavy soil, loam, clay, up to 100 years. There is no human population that will sustain 100 more years of what we have introduced into our food system. There will not be one human crawling on this planet continuing down this road. So simply banning it, if we could stop it all today, we would still have 50 to 100 years of natural metabolism before these chemicals will be gone. And the only thing that will be here are microbes digesting the last pesticides. We will be long gone. We can't sustain another century of working our way down off of this mountain. The remediation of these toxins have to be in our food systems now. So that's what we're going to talk about. So we are right in the middle of our second set of tests on remediating environmental toxins out of the soil, out of the plants, out of the food chain for livestock. So that's what we'd like to go to and share on our screen right now. Glyphosate is one of the more persistent pesticides, but there are over 200 additional pesticides that over the decades we have used and applied in various or all aspects of agriculture. And so what we want to talk about right now are the environmental toxins. Okay, these can't continue to persist. So right now, present in almost all farming soils, right, we have decades ahead of us to just casually let nature remediate this. Glyphosate, because it is phosphate based, appears to the plant as the same phosphate molecule. The plant will take up phosphate and glyphosate equally. So if there's glyphosate in the soil, it's going to show up in the plant even and long after the applications of glyphosate have stopped. Okay, I'm absolutely for the banning of these chemicals, but the solution is not to wait for them to simply dissipate from our soils. We don't have time. We have to get them out of our food chain now. Okay, studies show the effective tox on the liver and the kidneys in lab animals of glyphosate at 0.1 part per billion in drinking water. 0.1, that's 1/10 of 1 part per billion. Another study shows the signs of fatty liver disease in rats at exposures of 0.1 part per million.
Per billion.
Or excuse me, part per billion. Okay, we are now testing soils. And what we are finding is how rapidly, with different methods, we can remediate them. So these two fields are side by side. They've both been farmed decades with genetically engineered corn and genetically engineered alfalfa. Okay, the conventional field currently in genetically engineered alfalfa shows a tissue level of 54.3 parts per billion. The field that we have been putting on aerobic biology for the last 1.5 years, we have reduced that to 28.78 parts per billion. So in essence, just aerobically in the last 1.5 years with the microbes we've been applying, we've reduced the glyphosate content in plants by 50%. Now we have another program that we are going to begin, and we will have tests back this fall where we expect a much faster, more aggressive remediation. And so that's part of the testing that's underway. By the way, Jared, we just got these tests back from HRI Labs today. This is our
It's pretty
first set of
timely.
responses. Pardon?
That is pretty timely.
Very, very timely. Okay. And so as you look at this, these are the fields, the two fields that we're remediating. Right here is one's the GMO alfalfa, one is the organic forage that we're growing on a separate field using biology. So as you can see, the 28 parts per billion versus the 54 parts per billion. Maximum residue levels for glyphosate in drinking water in the US is 700 parts per billion. That is friggin' insane that the government would ever establish a level like this, because at 0.1 part per billion, it's toxic. The EU for glyphosate levels is zero point 0.1 part per billion, and it's still toxic. So our government is doing absolutely no favors for us in lowering or limiting the exposure of chemicals in our soils, in our water, and in our food. So when you look at this, Environmental Protection Agency, this is parts per million. Okay, now you have to times this by 1,000 to get to parts per billion. But you begin to look at the limits that are allowed in here. And so you look at corn, you look at eggs, you look at grain, you look at meat, hog meat, five parts per million. That is 5,000 parts per billion. And our government is telling us it's safe. That's absolutely a lie. Soybean, forages. You look at our vegetables. These numbers are astronomical in compared to actual human toxicity to livers and to kidneys. Any plant or seed directly fed to humans or animals must have glyphosate eliminated from the soil, because what is in the soil is going to come through in that plant. And the animal forages have to be fermented to remove glyphosate. Now, here's a critical component. All right. If we have glyphosate in the soil, which almost all soils do, the plants are going to have and show glyphosate content. That is going right into the food chain, whether it's for humans, whether it's for livestock, all of that toxicity transfers straight across. Now, what we're doing is we are looking to remediate and reduce this glyphosate through microbial digestion. So our process is, at some point, we have to eliminate these environmental toxins into our food chain. So one is obviously the soil. If we can clean up the soil, it's not in the plant, it won't be in the forage. Right now, soils are massively contaminated. So we are working on biological remediation through fermentation. So we're taking forages and we are fermenting them up at high moisture with the proper microbial balances and microbial types. This is the key to this is not the type of microbe, it is the formulation of the entire process. And so we have a whole series of microbes aligned in processes that go through degradation of these chemicals step by step by step. And those are the additional tests that we're waiting for. We'll have in the next week or two. And so our theory is that through known biological interactions through aggressive fermentation, we can and have in the past completely eliminated glyphosate, mycotoxins, aflatoxins, all types of zearalenone and mold. And so we can stop it before it gets into the food chain for our cattle, for our pork, for our lamb, for any type of ruminant animal. We can stop it at the fermentation side before it's fed so that the animal doesn't have it to go into the food chain. Ideally, we want to get it out of the soil, but a lot of places aren't. So, as an intermediate step between the soil and the animal, we're going to take it out and prove that through biological fermentation, which we have done for the last 19 years of testing. And so, we're very, very confident that following the procedures that we've now put into place, that we can reduce these micro toxins, these environmental toxins through microbial activity. And so now I want to switch over to uh, another concept of what's toxic in our food.
You stop sharing that screen.
Okay, now I'm going to switch to another screen because we are going to pick up some other PowerPoints. Okay, all right, we're back to another screen, and I want to bring some points up here. We've had a dramatic shift in our food in the last literally 120 years, a massive shift. Our ancestral diets were whole foods with natural saturated fats. Now, what we're doing is we're shifting from environmental toxins back to food toxins. Okay, so there's these toxins are driving disease in the human family. And so we're on two courses that are completely destructive. The environmental toxin source and the toxins within our food sources that are massively impacting our cellular metabolic system. And so today, because of this massive shift in our food system, we now have approximately 80 new metabolic diseases that did not exist 100 years ago. Not one of them. And so this is long before the introduction of most environmental toxins. Food toxicity came first. Environmental toxicity came second. And both will completely, if we continue down these roads, we're going to destroy the health of our families, the health of our nation, the health of the world. And so when you look at this, is what has happened and when. And so we go back and we look at the history of mankind. We haven't changed genetics. Okay, we've lived for thousands upon thousands upon thousand years of natural food. Well, when we started changing food, things began to show up in response. You can look at thousands of years of humans eating natural diets and saturated fats. No metabolic degenerative diseases from that food source. Okay, when we introduced this in the late 1800s, and we'll go through some of these slides later on the time frames, when we introduced these food changes, we then began to see the response of disease within the human family. Currently, at present, and there's a lot of sources on this, the CDC, the American Cancer Association, the American Heart Association, we have at least 95% of the US population is metabolically dysfunctional. And it's probably closer to 98%, which simply means is our cells are not functioning as they're designed to function. And so from that, we're going to begin to experience a whole series of cellular downregulation, defects, and disease. And that's where we are now. When you go back and look at it, the first documented heart attack in the United States occurred in 1912. Barely 110 years ago, 113 years ago. Very first one. In 2023, 681,000 Americans died of heart disease. This did not exist over 100 years ago. You go back 200 years on cancer, one in almost 190 persons died of cancer, but they still had things that alcohol, they had tobacco, they had those kind of things that would cause cellular dysfunction. But now cancer is the second leading death. It is almost 1 in 2.5. So how did we go from 1 in almost 200 to almost 1 in 2? Okay, what we ended up doing was we started changing from a natural diet to a very unnatural diet. When we go back and we look at this, what we substituted real food for and saturated fats, we substituted it for refined wheat, we substituted it for sugar, and we substituted it for vegetable oils. And vegetable oils are as metabolically toxic as our environmental chemicals are metabolically toxic. And I'm going to go through and show you how. Okay? Our systems are designed to operate on an essential fatty acid ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 of 1:1. Has been forever. We didn't have degenerative diseases. These are your natural ratios in your natural fats, in grazing animals, in all wildlife, right? And so we want to stay under that threshold of 2.5 to 3:1, and there is no disease that comes from that. All right, so look at our grains. Now we're going to come back to this concept is we need to operate on a 1:1 basis. 1 omega-6, 1 omega-3. The omega-6s are oxidative. The omega-3s are antioxidative. Very critical roles because we need actually oxidation. We have to have it in our diet. Okay. We stay warm. We stay at 98.6 because our cells can metabolize and oxidize fuel. When we get sick and we create a fever, or we go to 101, 102, 103, it all comes from oxidization. Your immune system is using oxidization to kill viruses and pathogens. Okay, so oxidization is absolutely essential. You won't have any energy without oxidization. The problem is we don't have enough antioxidization. And so when we look at grains, when we look at food sources, all of our natural food sources were very close to that 1:1, 2:1 ratio. Well, when we start looking at corn, genetically engineered corn, almost 35 oxidative omega-6s to 1 antioxidative omega-3. Oats, almost, these are 27. We found non-GMO corn at around 26. Wheat at over 15, barley just under 15, peas are at 10. Well, when we feed these grains to livestock, look where the meat ends up. We have American Wagyu, okay, Angus and Wagyu cross beef, almost 27-1. Incredibly toxic. Commercial chicken over 16-1 because it's fed grain, right? You look at a pork chop, mostly fed corn, it's up near 30-1. Even bison, grain-fed bison is over 20-1. These are highly, highly inflammatory, oxidative meats now because of these cellular toxins, these omega-6s. So let's look at what nature does. All right. Grazing forages, they're antioxidative in grasses and legumes and mixed forages, you have more omega-3s than you have omega-6s. They're antioxidative. And so you look at bison that is grass-fed. It's well under 2.5 to 1. You look at mule deer, it's less than 2 to 1. Wild elk is barely 2 to 1. You've got pheasant, you've got hare, you've got red deer, roe deer, antelope, moose, you've got grass-fed meat. Anything nature produced never produced anything with a high omega-6 and a low omega-3 ratio. It never did, and it never will, because those ratios have been the basic sustaining of the human family metabolic system for thousands upon thousands of years. So here's a closer look at our antioxidant, anti-inflammatory forages. And so this is how you get meat that is in a balanced ratio of omega-6s to omega-3s. I'm going to come down here to 18. Okay, so here's a slide where we've taken a whole bunch of different meats from different places and we've just tested them. Now, these are all grain-fed based diets for these different types of animals. So we've got pork, almost 28.7 to 1. Okay, this is the American Wagyu, 26.5 to 1. This is just straight meat out of Omaha steak, 20.5 to 1. You know it's fed grain, mostly corn. Okay, you've got this operation, which is grass-fed and grain-finished. But even the last few months on grain takes it from a 1 to 1 or a 2 to 1 up to over 7 to 1. This lamb came from New Zealand. New Zealand has grass all year round, but they can't fatten them on grass. So they use grain to finish it, and again, it elevates it up over 7. Organic chicken. Now, people think, man, I'm eating organic, I'm a healthy cuss. No, you're not. You got to remember, 3 years to be organically certified does not mean you have removed the glyphosate from your soil and your plants and your forages. Nor, if you feed grains that are high in these polyunsaturated oils, you're going to have high oxidation, high inflammatory properties in your cells from organic meat. You have generic chicken breasts, 16 to 1. Eggs, again, 14.3 to 1, 14.5 to 1. Animals are what they eat. They can't be anything different. Bison, massive bison study done by the University of North Dakota, University of Nebraska out of Canada. Grain-fed bison, 21 omega-6s to 1 omega-3. And people want to tell you that bison is a better meat than beef. Only depends on how it's fed. If you feed it just like beef, it's going to turn out just as bad and unhealthy and oxidative and inflammatory as beef is. That bison is not a filter for all the crap that you feed it. Now, grass-fed animals are going to be in that under 3 range because it's a grass, it's a forage. The problem is grass doesn't convert well, so it's a little bit slow in growing. It takes longer, and so the meat is leaner and it's tougher. With our fermentation program, we can grow the animals in less time than feedlot time on the grasses and the fermented forages that are natural, but we can create an exceptional omega-6 to omega-3 ratio of virtually 1 to 1. And so we're removing the food toxins by feeding the right forages, and we're increasing the profitability and the marketing time for producers into the market to produce this kind of meat. And so our program is we can feed 2 to 3 animals on our fermented forage basis that you can feed 1 grass-fed animal. So when you look at the profitability of that, you just exponentially increased your profit potential. Not a little bit. You didn't double it. You didn't triple it because you're feeding more animals in half the time. That does a lot to your cash flow. And so this is the last slide in this one. We're going to switch to another PowerPoint.